In this video, we'll talk about 7 easy steps you can take to start building your emergency reserve. So easy, in fact, that you can start with step 1 today. This video is for those who are new to their financial journey and want to start with the right foundations in place. But this also applies for those who have been investing for a few years but had to take a step back and tap into their emergency funds because of all the challenges that we've faced together. Hopefully, this video helps you fund your reserves back up quickly. If we haven't met before, welcome to the channel. My name's Hervin Pesa. I'm a financial planner, but just like you, I'm still in this journey to building wealth and financial independence. So I share weekly money lessons that I pick up along the way, both at work and with my own experience. All these money lessons that we really wish we all learned from school. So if you're ready to join us in this journey, consider subscribing and be sure to hit the bell so you never miss any of the lessons. With that, let's move on to step number 1. Step number 1, let's build some guiding principles for your emergency fund. You need to understand what counts as an emergency and create your principles around that. That's step 1. Understand why you can actually tap into this fund, so that you know that you're not going to be using this for silly things like Black Friday is around the corner, right? Or Cyber Monday. This is not for that. It's a rainy day fund. It's a fund for things that God only knows about, right? The thing is, you're either going through something or you're going to go through something. Be ready for that. That's what this fund is for. So set a principle, set your own personal rules. You would even write it down, right? I can only tap into this fund for X reasons, and you need to come up with that. That would be the first step. We want to make sure that if you're calling this your rainy day fund, we really understand what it means to go through a rainy day. That way, you also have a measure of success. And I'm not just talking about funding. I'm talking about having the comfort level that you need to go through the rainy days. Think about what's happened right now. It's a wake-up call, right? For a lot of people. And for me personally, I feel like I need to bolster up my own personal reserves. So that would be step 1. Determine what it means for you to have an emergency. What counts as an emergency so that you're okay drawing from this. But a part of that, and part of that setting principle, is also understanding that your emergency reserve is there for what reason? An emergency. It's there to keep you afloat. I already did a video on the reasons for having it, but really, I just want to reiterate that, right? When you're building your reserve, success isn't about returns. It's about the fund being there when you need it. Step number 2. Determine what you spend on a monthly basis. We already have a video talking about a super simple budget that you can actually stick to. Be sure to watch that after. But one of the things that I talk about in that budget is creating a cash flow system where you're allocating where your money is going. And one of the steps there is to look back, look at 3 months worth of your own personal expenses to see how much you're actually spending. Look at your debit statements and your credit statements and consider that to be your base spending. But here's the thing. I know that when you look at that budget, there's gonna be items there that you can cut out if you are in a real emergency. So you might have to cut out some of the things in your lifestyle, right? Like you're not gonna be eating out, having beers, or having fun on Friday night if you lost your job, right? You just wouldn't do that. So a lot of those expenses, you're gonna trim out. So step 2 is finding out what your monthly spend is, and then look at the items there that you can remove, and we'll use that as our emergency target. What is our bare minimum? Step 3 is really when we start determining how much we need to accumulate to be fully funded when it comes to our emergency reserve. We know what it costs us to live and survive on a monthly basis. Now let's determine whether or not you actually need 3 months or 6 months of savings to fund your emergency needs. Here's a few things to consider. If you have a stable career and it's gonna be easy for you to replace your job if you got laid off, it's very likely that a 3-month spending budget is enough for you to fund your emergency reserve. But if you're in a career where there's feast or famine and there's ebbs and flows when it comes to your personal income, if you rely highly on commission, if you rely highly on bonuses, then it might be worthwhile for you to consider getting a 6-month emergency reserve instead of aiming for 3. The other consideration here is if you have a spouse, Are they working in a stable career as well? Remember, we're looking at months of household spending, right? We're not looking at just your income or your partner's income. What does it take to run the household? If your partner also has a job and they have a stable career, whether it's an hourly job or a salaried position, and it's easy for them to find a new job, if they're the ones that got laid off, then maybe 3 months is sufficient. So you take the number that you got from step 2 and multiply that by 3 if you believe that 3 months is sufficient for you. Notice that we're talking about household spending. We're not talking about household income, because in step 2, we whittled down what we would really need to maintain ourselves during an emergency, right? So 3 months or 6 months will be determined by stability of your work, stability of your partner's work, and your level of spending, right? Step 4, now you know how much you need and you know what counts as an emergency. Now it's time for you to actually start building that up. Open a separate bank account. We can talk about where you're gonna be holding these later on. We'll have to do a different video for this because depending on where you are, if you're watching from the States or in Canada, I have a few recommendations and things that I've read up on that you can actually put your cash in high interest savings accounts. And I wanna separate that from this video because those can change. But right now, the key thing is you open up an account with a separate financial institution if you can. If you can't, at least separate the accounts and rename it. Most apps now, most bank accounts you can open and you can nickname them. So in this case, I would nickname this specific account my Sleep Soundly Fund, or just in case fund, right? Or God only knows fund, or opportunity fund. But make sure if you're looking at your banking app, there's a clear label on why you're shoveling money into this account every single month and until it's fully funded. So open that with, hopefully, if you can, open it with a separate banking institution. Make sure that you do that. That way you can set up automatic transfers to this and consider this as a bill. You're gonna be paying your emergency reserve first consistently every month by setting up automatic monthly transfers to this account. Aside from seeing it separately, opening it with a different institution actually gives buffer time. Part of the principle is figuring out when's an emergency, right? There are times in our lives where we're faced with decisions that we would actually be better off if we slowed down a little bit. If it takes 1 business day or 2 business days for cash to transfer from bank A to bank B or account A to account B, that time might actually be enough for you to figure out some other solution that wouldn't require you to spend the cash. So that buffer might actually come in handy. The 5th step to building your emergency reserve is simple: prioritize it. Right now, there's gonna be a bunch of conflicting goals in your life, right? Maybe you can only put 10% into your emergency reserve and another 10% into your RSPs or your other long-term goals, or maybe your debts. It might make sense for you to actually pause everything else that you're doing so that you can focus on building up your reserve quickly. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but consider this, right? If you can only put in 10% of your income into the emergency fund every month, it'll take you 10 months just to get 1 month worth of income or spending, right? That might take you too long before you actually have enough in there where it'll support you through an emergency. What I would suggest then is if you're making RSP contributions at work and you're making extra beyond that and you're building up your reserve too, maybe you continue your contributions at work, but you stop it, you cap it where the max cap or the max matchup is. Beyond that, you focus all your extra cash into the reserve. And when it comes to focusing on this, this might actually also mean finding ways to increase your income, whether finding a side hustle. For me, one of the things that I could potentially do is write generic articles about financial planning and investing and get paid, I think, $150 per article on those. And that's something that I could pursue if I was building this. The point is, you might already have skills and things that you're doing that you can get paid for on top of your regular work. Because even if you decide that you're gonna cut back on expenses and cut back on things that are leisure or lifestyle, that could only go so far. So when you're focusing on building up your reserve, you're gonna do everything in your power to 1, increase your income, 2, reduce your expenses. So find the unnecessary things. find the things that you would cut out if you were in an emergency. That ties us back to step 2. All the things that you believe you can get rid of when it comes to an emergency, maybe now is the time for you to practice. Maybe suspend some subscriptions that you're not really using, and you can consider adding those back up when you've already funded your reserve. So maybe, for me, like I have a bunch of software that I really wanna learn and use, but I don't necessarily even have the time to get into those right now. So maybe I can save $50 or $100 a month and cut back on those, and then add that to whatever focus goal that I have is right now. So look at your own spending in step 2, figure out the things that you said you would cut when it comes to an emergency, and start practicing that today, just until you've funded your reserve completely. This becomes a touchy subject now, right? What if you have debts? Do you pause your payments? Do you just make minimum payments on that and build up your reserve? Honestly, if you're the type of person that can only focus on one thing, then maybe it's worth doing that. But this is what I would do. I would create a mini emergency fund, at least $2,500, because most emergencies right now, if you got into a car crash or a hailstorm rolled by or a windstorm rolled by, most deductibles now for home and auto insurance is at $1,000, maybe even higher depending on where you live, because they do that by area code now. You might not even be able to buy a $1,000 deductible plan for your property because of previous hail damage. So make sure that you're at the very least, matching up as your emergency, your mini reserve, you're matching up whatever your deductibles are for your insurance plans. When you've reached that, go back to debt payments. When you finish your debt payments, then go back to building your reserves based on step number 3. Step 6, automate, automate, automate. You can't be using willpower every month to determine how much you're gonna transfer from your main account to your emergency fund. So figure out whatever your free cash flow is, whether it's $200, $300, $400, $500 every month that you can dedicate to doing this and reaching this goal. Set that up. When you open your bank account in step 4, create an automatic transfer as your minimum contribution monthly to your emergency fund. And then let's spice it up a little bit. Whenever you have extra cash, whenever you have loose change, just collect that in a jar somewhere, take that to the bank once a month, and that becomes your top up. But at the minimum, create a base automatic transfer to this fund, whatever that is. You might even be able to do that bi-weekly if you're getting paid every 2 weeks. So please set it up. Don't rely on your future willpower to make this happen. Step 7, celebrate and review. Celebrate your milestones. The first milestone would probably be $2,500. If you can get that quickly, by selling a bunch of stuff that you're not using around the house, that's fantastic. Think of a treat that you're gonna give yourself every time you hit that benchmark. So that's milestone number 1, right? $2,500. Milestone number 2 is when you get to the point where you have 1 month of expenses stashed aside. And we keep going. We go back to our regular contributions to that fund. We gotta keep at our emergency fund, right? And the final stop is if you've determined in step 3 that you need 3 months, that's your final milestone, and you move on to the next goal. And you review this every year, right? Whether your reserve is still big enough for your current lifestyle, but really, once you've gotten to that point, get comfortable with it and move on to the next goal that you have. But if you found out that you need 6 months, then celebrate at month 3, and then again at month 6. You need to make sure that you're encouraging yourself. You're supporting good behavior. You're supporting good habits when you're doing this, because it's difficult. And the truth is, most of your friends are not gonna agree with you when you're saying no to dinners out and activities because you're focused on doing this. So that's step 7. Make sure you celebrate your wins and celebrate it often. Of course, don't go YOLO and don't blow up your emergency fund, right? Don't blow up your savings, but make sure that you're celebrating and you're making progress and you're tracking that along the way. That's it, 7 easy steps to start building your emergency reserve. I hope that helps you. Until next time, stay aware, take control. I love y'all. Peace out.